Book 3, Chapter 43, The City Burning. The goddess added, "Know further, O king, that you are destined to fall in this great battle, and that will you have former realm presented to you in the same manner as before. Your minister and his maiden daughter will accompany you to the former city, and you shall enter your lifeless corpse, lying in state in the palace. We shall fly there like the wind before you, and you will follow us unaccompanied by the minister and his virgin daughter, like one returning to his native country. Your way there will be as slow or swift as those of horses, elephants, asses, or camels, but your course is quite different from any of these." Vasishta speaking. As the king and the goddess were going on with his sweet conversation, a man on horseback arrived before them in great hurry and confusion. He said, "Lord, I come to tell that the enemy is showering darts and discs, swords and clubs upon us like rain, and they have been pressing upon us like a flood on all sides. They have been raining their heavy weapons upon us at pleasure, like the impetuous gusts of a hurricane hurls down fragments of rocks from the heads of high hills. There they have set fire to our fortress-like city, and fires are burning on all sides like a wildfire. It is burning and engulfing houses with a hideous noise. The smoke rising like heaving hills have covered the skies like a flood of clouds, and the flames of fire leaping high resemble a Garuda bird flying in the sky." Vasishta said, as the royal marshal was delivering this unpleasant intelligence trepidation, there arose a loud cry from outside that filled the sky with its uproar. The twanging of bowstrings drawn to the ears, the rustling of flying arrows flung with full force, the loud roaring of furious elephants, and the shrieks of frightened ones. Gorgeous elephants bursting into the city with a clattering sound, and the high, loud shouts of citizens whose houses have burnt to the ground. The falling and flying of burnt embers with a crackling noise, and the burning of raging fire with a hoarse sound. All these were heard and seen by the goddesses and the king and his minister from an opening of the tent. The city was ablaze in the darkness of the night. It was like the conflagration or fiery ocean of the last day. The city was covered by clouds of the enemy army, with their flashing weapons waving on all sides. The flames rose as high as the sky, and the all-dissolving fire of destruction melted buildings as big as hills. Bodies of thick clouds roared on high and threatened the people, like the clamor of stout robber gangs gathered for plunder. The city was ablaze in the darkness of night. The heavens were hidden under clouds of smoke, rolling like the shades of Pushkara and Abarta, put at the end of the world, and the flames of fire flashed like the golden peaks of Meru. Burning cinders and sparks of fire glittered in the sky like meteors and stars, and the blazing houses and towers flared like burning mountains. Groups of soldiers were attacked by the spreading flames that trapped burnt citizens with their bitter cries between clouds of fire and their fear of the enemy outside. Sheets of arrow-like sparks flew in the air on all sides, and showers of burning missiles fell everywhere, burning and piercing people in large numbers. The greatest and most expert champions fought, but were crushed under the feet of elephants. Streets were heaped with treasures wrested from looters in their retreat. Men and women wailed at the falling of firebrands upon them, and the splitting of splinters and the slitting of timbers emitted a crack, crack noise all around. Big blocks of burning wood were blown up, blazing in the air like burning suns, and heaps of embers filled the face of the earth with living fire. The air echoed with the crackling of combustible wood and the bursting of burning bamboo, the cries of parched animals, and the howling of soldiers. The flaming fire was quenched after consuming the royal city to ashes, and the devouring flames ceased after they had reduced everything to cinders. The sudden outbreak of fire was like burglars breaking into a house, and upon its sleeping inhabitants. It made prey of everything that fell in its way. At this moment, King Vidarata heard a voice from his soldiers, who saw wives fleeing from the scorching flames. Oh, the high winds that have blown flames to the tops of our houses with their rustling sound, and that have hindered our taking shelter under cooling protection. Sorrow for the burning of our wives, who, by pacifying the smart of every pain, were as cold as frost to our bodies before, and whose ashes now rest in our breasts like the lime from burnt shells. Oh, the mighty power of fire that has burned the hair of our fair maidens like blades of grass or straw. Curling smoke is ascending on high, like a whirling and long meandering river in the air. And black and white fumes of fire resemble the dark stream of Yamuna in one place, and the milky path of the eternal Ganga in another. Streams of smoke, bearing the sparks on high, dazzle the sight of heavenly charioteers with their bubbling sparks. Our fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, relations, and chariot suckling babes are all burnt alive in the black and blue flames. Here are we burning with grief for them in these houses that have been spared by the devouring fire. See there, the howling fire is fast advancing to those houses, and here the cinders are falling as thick as the frost on Mount Meru. Behold the dire darts and missiles dropping down like driving rain, breaking windows like bodies of gnats in the shade of evening, flashing spears and fire flaring above the watery ocean of the sky. Resemble an undersea fire ascending to heaven. Smoke is rising in clouds, and flames are tapering in the form of towers, and all that was humid and green is sucked and dried up like the hearts of the dispassionate. Trees are broken down by the raging fire, like posts by enraged elephants. They are falling with a crackling noise, as if they were screaming at their own fall. Trees in the orchards, now flourishing in their luxury of fruits and flowers, are left bare by the burning fire. Like householders bereft of their property, children abandoned by their parents in the darkness of the night, fleeing through the streets, are either being pierced by flying arrows or crushed under falling houses. Elephants posted at the front of the army were frightened by the flying embers driven by the wind, and fled with loud screaming at the fall of the burning houses upon them. Oh, the pain of being put to the sword is no more terrible than being burned by fire or smashed under the stones of a thundering engine. Streets are filled with domestic animals and cattle of all kinds, let loose from their folds and stalls to raise their commingled cries in the blocked streets, like the confused noise of battle. Weeping women passed like lotus flowers on land, with their lotus-like faces, feet, and palms. Drops of tears fell upon the ground like fluttering beads from their lotus-shaped eyes and wet apparel. The red taints and spots of the hair clusters upon their foreheads and cheeks burned like ashoka flowers. Alas for pity, that the furious flame of fire, like a ruthless victor who delights in acts of inhumanity, should singe the black-lined, bee-like eyelids of our dear-eyed fairies. Oh, the bond of marriage love, that the faithful wife never fails to follow her burning lord, and cremates herself in the same flame with him. The elephant burned on his trunk after breaking the burning post to which he was tied by the leg, ran violently to a lake of lotuses, in which he fell dead. The flames of fire, flashing like flitting lightning amidst clouds of smoke, darted burning coals like bolts of thunder in showers. Lord, the sparks of fire against the dusty clouds appeared like glittering gems in the bosom of the airy ocean, and, seen by their twirling grid, the crown of heaven with the girdle of the Pleiades. The sky was reddened by the lights of flaming fires and appeared like the courtyard of dead, dyed with purple colors in joy for reception of the souls of the dead. Alas, the day and want of manners that royal dames were forcefully carried away by these armed ruffians. See them dragged from their stately building, and in the streets, strewing their paths with wreaths of flowers torn from their necks, while their half-burned locks were hanging loosely upon their bare breasts. Their loose clothing, uncovering their backs and loins, and jewelry dropped from their wrists, were strewn on the ground. Their necklaces were torn and their pearls scattered about. Their bodies are bared of their bodices, and their golden-colored breasts appear to view. Their shrill cries and groans, rising above the war cry, choke their breasts and split their sides. They fall unconscious, eyes dimmed by ceaseless flood of tears. They fell in a body with their arms twisted about each other's necks, and ends of their claws tied to each other's. In this way, they are forcibly dragged ruffians, their bodies mangled in blood. Ah, who will save them from this state? Cried the royal soldiers with piteous looks at the sad plight of the women and shedding big drops of tears like lotuses. The bright face of the sky turned black at the horrible sight, and it looked with its lotus-like eyes of clouds on the fair lotus-like maidens thus scattered on the ground. Thus, like these ladies, the goddess of royal prosperity, decorated as she was with her waving and pendant locks, her flowing garments, flowery garlands, and ornamental jewelry, was brought to the end after her enjoyment of the pleasures of royalty and gratification of all her desire. Chapter 44. Enlightened Leela sees Vidaratha's Queen Leela. Habits of the mind reproduce the same images. Vashishta said, at this instant, the great queen, who was the bloom of youthful beauty, entered Vidaratha's camp like the goddess of grace hops upon the lotus flower. She was decorated with hanging wreaths of flowers and necklaces, and accompanied by a train of her youthful companions and handmaid, all terrified with fear. With her face as bright as the moon and her form as fair as the lily, she appeared like a star of heaven, her teeth shining like sets of stars, and her bosom throbbing with fear. Then one of her companions informed the king about the fate of the warfare, which resembled the onset of demons upon the Apsara tribe. Lord, she said, this lady has fled with us from her harem to take refuge under your arms, like a tender vine seeks the shelter of a tree from a rude gust of wind. See the ravishing the wives of children with their uplifted arms, like the swelling of waves of the sea in their rapid current, carrying away the tree groves from the bank. The guards of the royal harem all crushed to death by haughty marauders, as the sturdy trees of the forest are broken down by the furious tornado. Our armies, frightened by the enemy from afar, dare not approach the falling city, as nobody ventures to rescue lotus beds from a flood under the threatening thunders of a rainy night. Hostile forces have poured into the city in terrible numbers, and having set it on fire, are shouting loudly under the clouds of smoke. Their weapons brandished on all sides. Handsome ladies, fowlers, and fishermen, dragged by hair from their families like screaming cranes, caught and carried away by cruel fowlers and fishermen. Now we have brought this luxurious, tender creeper to you, so that your might save her from similar fate. Hearing this, he looked at the goddesses and said, "Now I will go from here to war and leave this, my lady, as a humble being at your lotus feet." Saying so, the king rose in a rage from his seat and sprang like an enraged lion when pierced and pressed by the tusk of a furious elephant. The widowed Leela saw the queen Leela to be exactly of her form and features, and took her for a true reflection of herself in a mirror. Then the enlightened Leela said to Saraswati, tell me, O goddess, how can this lady be exactly like myself? She is what I have been before. How did she come to be like me? I see this prime minister with all these horses, soldiers, and citizens, these forces, vehicles, all to be the same as mine, and situated in the same place and manner as before. How is it then, O goddess, that they came to be placed in this place? I see them as images, placed within and outside the mirror of my mind. And know not whether these living beings or my imagination. Saraswati replied, all our external perceptions of things are the immediate effects of our internal conception of it. The intellect has the knowledge of all that can be presented in it, just like the mind has the impressions of mental objects in itself. The external world appears in an instant in the same form and manner to one who lasts as his motion and impression in his intellect and mind. And no distance of time or place or any intermediate cause can create any difference in them. The inner world is seen on the outside, like the internal impressions of our minds appear to be seen outside us in our dreams. Whatever is within, the same appears without, as with our dreams and desires, and in all our imagination and fancies of objects. It is the constant habit of your mind that presents these things as realities to your sight. You saw your husband in the same state in which you thought he was when he died in that city of yours. It is the same place where he now exists. Even now, he is presented with the same objects of his thought as he had at that moment. Anything that appears to be different in this state comes from the turn of his mind, thinking it so before. All that appears real to him is the creation of his fancy, and is as unreal as his dream or desire. For everything appears to be the same as it is thought of in the mind. Say, therefore, what truth can there be in these envisioned objects, which are unsubstantial as dreams, and in the end vanish into airy nothing? Then know that everything is no better than nothing, and, like a dream, proves to be nothing upon waking. Waking is also a dream, and equally nothing at death. Death in lifetime is a non-existence, and life in death becomes null and extinct. These extinctions of life and death proceed from the fluctuating nature of our notions of them. So there is neither any entity nor a non-entity either. Both appear to us by turns as fallacies. For what after an kalpa eon neither was nor will be cannot exist today or in any epoch, yuga, whether gone before or coming afterwards. That which is never non-existent is the existent Brahman. And that is the world. It is in him that we see everything rise and fall by our fallacy, and what we falsely term as the creation or the created. As phantoms appear in the emptiness, all are vacant and void. And as the waves of the sea are nothing but its water, so do these created beings and things exist and appear in Brahman only, as the minutiae appearing in the air vanish in the air, and the dust driven by the winds is lost in the wind. So far, false notions of yourself and myself are lost in that supreme self in which all things rise and fall like waves of the ocean. What reliance can there be in this dust of creation, which is no more than the water of the mirage? When everything is united in that soul unity, the knowledge of individualities is mere fallacy. We see apparitions in the dark. Through the darkness itself is no apparition. Our lives and deaths are the false notions of our error, and the entities of existence is equally the production of gross error. Maya. All this is himself, for he is the great Kalpa, or will that produces everything. It is he who exists when all things are extinct in him. Therefore, these appearances are neither real nor unreal of themselves. But to say both real and unreal are Brahman is a contradiction. Therefore, it is he who fills the infinity of space and abides equally in all things and their minutest particle. Wherever the spirit of Brahman abides, and even in the most minute living particle, it views the whole world in itself, like one thinking on heat and cold, of fire and frost, as the same sensation within himself at that moment. So does the pure consciousness perceive the Holy Spirit of God within itself. Just like one sees particles of light lying in his closest at sunset. So these multitudes of worlds move about like particles in the infinite space of the divine mind, as the particles of odorous substances oscillate in empty air. In this way, This world abides in its incorporeal state, in the mind of God, with all its modifications of existence and non-existence, emanation and absorption, its condensation into dense and diffusion into subtle, and its movement and rest. But you must know all these modes and conditions of being belong only to material and not to the spirit, which is unconditioned and indivisible. There is no change or division of one's own mind or soul, so there is no partition or variation of the Supreme Spirit. It is according to ideas that in our minds, that we see things in their different aspects before us. Yet the word world, Vishwa, is not a meaningless term. It means the all is contained in Brahman. Therefore, it is both real and unreal at the same time, like the fallacy of a snake in a rope. It is the false notion of that snake that makes the true rope appear like the untrue snake to us. Which we are apt to take for the true snake itself. So, in the same way, we make the mistake of taking divine consciousness, which is the prime cause of all, to be an individual soul. It is this notion of the individual soul that makes us think of ourselves as living beings, which, whether it be false or true, is like the appearance of the world in empty air. Thus, these little animals delight themselves with their own misconceived idea of being living beings, while others who think themselves so by their notions, preconceived notions as such. There are some who have no preconceived notions, and others who retain the same as or a somewhat different notion of themselves than before. Somewhere inborn notions predominate, and sometimes they are entirely lost. Our preconceived notions of individuals represent unrealities as realities to our minds, and present the thoughts of our former family and birth, and the same occupations and professions before us.